Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to CIBSE, Chartered Institute of Building Services, Home Counties Northwest region. It's a professional talk tonight. This is for everyone. It's not, you don't have to be a member of CIBSE, you don't have to be a member of the Northwest Committee. It's for anyone who's interested in the subject. I'd like to make apologies on behalf of Gita Mathayana, who's the chair of the committee, who can't make it tonight and has asked me to introduce the guest speaker. Tonight's talk has been organised by the Northwest Committee, and we all have separate committees, and we all organise committees and talks to have as much diversity as possible. This committee has quite a broad range of wide subjects on ethics and law and collaboration. Tonight's subject is a really important subject on mental health. It can sometimes be a taboo subject. I think people are taking it. Who's the founder member of Rising Vibes, and she gets involved in quite a lot of well-worthy projects. What we're going to do, we'll be taking questions as you want to ask them. If you put the questions in the chat as opposed to putting your hand up, I'll read out the question, so it will remain anonymous. We'll save 5 minutes at the end of the talk so you can ask some more questions, and Lou will also put her contact details at the end, so you could ask private questions afterwards, or if the time runs out, so you could ask questions to Lou, or you could get her involved if you have work projects or clients that would use and collaborate with Lou. So it's my great pleasure and privilege now to introduce Lou Banks of Rising Vibe to talk about mental health in the workplace. Thank you. Welcome, Lou.
Thanks, Keith. Right, let me share my slides. I'm just gonna, you can let me know.
Over to you.
Can you see them? All right, can you see my slides okay? Keith, can you see them? Give me a...
Not yet.
Okay,
yeah.
Let me know when
yes,
they're up.
It's on.
Yeah, they're there. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, they're up. They're up.
But so, first of all, thank you very much for having me. As Keith said, my name's Lou, and I'm founder of Rising Vibe. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about us, so you get a bit of insight into why what we're going to be talking about tonight is important to us as a business. As Keith said, I'll just reinforce, please ask questions as you go through, and not just questions, actually. If you've got, you want more clarity, you want a little bit more insight, you want me to reinforce a point, you want to challenge something, please do that. I am all about that. The brand is all about that. This, next hour is for you. So, and as Keith said, if you put it into chat, because we're recording this, then Keith can let me know if there's any questions, and then it can be anonymous. And at the end, when we do a 5-minute roundup, we'll make sure we stop recording so that if you want to, we can engage in the normal way by having a conversation. So I'm going to talk you through some basic principles and the philosophy at Rising Vibe, which is not vastly different, I don't think, but I'm going to share with you some concepts that I think really help us to understand why all of us, by the way, every single one of us at some point in our lives will struggle in terms of not feeling great. So the way that we talk about mental health, well-being at Rising Vibe is not feeling good, and sometimes not feeling good for a sustained period of time, because language is so important. And we know that, especially male-dominated industries, we work with a lot of male-dominated sectors, actually talking about not feeling great is hard enough. So labeling that as mental health issues or mental illness makes it even harder to talk about. So we don't tend to talk about it in that way. We talk about not feeling good. And I'm going to show you our Rising Vibrational Scale at the end of this, which I will send a copy through to Keith and Ella, and they can send it out to all of you. And if you wanted to I would really encourage you to use it, because it's a great way to open up conversations about this subject in a much more safe way, I guess would be the way we talk about it. So just a little bit about Rising Vibe. We are culture consultants. So we work with our clients to help them create a high performing culture. And every single time we work with any client, cross sector, and we work with a very diverse client portfolio, the main challenge always is about the conversations that are really important, the conversations that matter, often not happening, whether that be around mental health, whether that be around performance management, whether that be giving someone feedback, whether that be around the equality, diversity and inclusion agenda. The conversations that feel most difficult are the ones that tend to matter the most and tend to be the ones that are avoided the most. So our mission is to support and challenge leaders to have the conversations that matter to enable a high performance culture. So that's what we're about. But ultimately, what's really important to us is helping our clients to create a culture that is psychologically safe. So culture, let's nutshell it, keep it really simple, like we like to do. It's what's it like to be around here? How do you want me to be around here? What is it like to work here? And if we have psychological safety, which is in a nutshell, feeling safe, secure, and being able to work without the fear of negative consequence, you have much more opportunity to drive a workplace where people are performing well. And when I say without the fear of negative consequence, in the commercial world, it's all about, driving revenue, saving cost. Of course it is. So if we're not delivering what we need to deliver, then there should be consequence. And what I mean by that is we should be held to account around what we've committed to delivering, around what we are expected to deliver. That's not what we mean with this statement. What we mean with this statement is feeling able to say, I don't understand, I don't agree, I'm struggling, I'm having issues at home, I could do with some extra support, the workload is overwhelming me. You get the picture. That is the environment that drives a culture that will become high performing when people feel able to say that kind of stuff without fear. So that's ultimately what we're about. And we talk about emotion all the time. And people will say to us, why are you so overt about emotion? Why are you so overt about how people are feeling? And it's really simple, actually. Number one, we all have emotion. Some of us don't necessarily like to admit that we feel things. Some of us don't like to engage with our emotions, but we have them. Whether you like it or not, we have them. And the really important part, based on the work that we do around emotion, is that how we feel about something will impact whether or not we engage with it or whether or not we resist it. So I was working with a client this morning about a big change piece of work, and some of the team are really feeling good about the change. They are bought into it. They believe it will help. So they are feeling good. Their emotions are what we would call high vibe. And I'll talk to you about that in a bit more detail. So higher vibe emotions means we will engage with something or someone. We feel good about our new line manager. We are going to be much more open to challenge, feedback, learning from them. If we don't feel good about a change, or we don't feel good about a person, we're going to resist engaging with them, resist learning from them, resist taking part in something. So how we feel, our emotions get in the way of everything or enable everything. So that's why we talk about it. And emotion and the workplace, emotion and business don't often go together, but we are very passionate about that. And we talk about the greatest leaders, and that can be leader of a project, by the way, not necessarily leader of people, will bring organizational goals. So let's set very clear expectations and let's hold people to account. Let's tell them when they're doing a great job and let's tell them when they're not. They're what we would call the organizational goals part, and then the human needs. So we need to bring organizational goals and human needs together. So the human needs part is checking in with people around how they're feeling, being okay with conversation around emotion and caring about what matters to people. And that might be knowing that they live on their own or, they're divorced or what their children are called. That can be important to some people. But for a lot of us, caring about what matters to us. So I, for example, am someone who absolutely needs direct, straight talking between the eyes interactions, especially in the workplace. When people do that for me, when people engage in an interaction like that with me, I feel really cared about, because they know it's important to me and they're helping me with that. So the human needs stuff can often be ignored. And actually, if the human needs focus is there, but there's no organizational goals focus, that's not helpful either. So we need to do both together. So that's what we're about. The other reason why emotion is so important is we are hardwired for connection, and we need a tribe for survival. So the reptilian brain still fires in exactly the same way it did billions of years ago. And when we don't feel connected to someone else or a group of people, we don't feel good. Emotionally, it impacts us hugely. And I'm going to talk to you a lot about that in a minute when I talk to you about social pain. Mental health includes our emotional well-being, and emotional well-being impacts our ability to function. So if we just have a workplace frame on right now and look through the workplace lens, if people aren't feeling good, they're not going to function well. They're not going to do the best job they can do. And we work with a lot of clients actually who would say, who have said, we need you to work with this team, or we need you to support this individual because they're just not performing. And if they were performing once, we don't lose our capability or competence unless we've got a head injury. We just don't become incompetent. What stops us performing to our best is when we don't feel good, when emotionally we're feeling unwell. So talking about emotion and using emotion in the workplace in a very open way, Keith talked about it not being a taboo subject right now. It is definitely less taboo than it was, but still very uncomfortable for a lot of people, which is why we're so out there with it, because it has a huge impact. And COVID has meant that low vibe emotions, the way that we talk about not feeling good, low vibe emotions are greater than they ever were before. So we're having people sharing with us, fear, anxiety and despair. Some people have been impacted so much by COVID, lost business, lost jobs, lost relationships, actually lost people to COVID. So people weren't necessarily feeling great a lot of the time before COVID was even a thing. And what COVID has done is made it much worse. So it's even more important now, as we come through it, fingers crossed we are coming through it, that we are mindful of that on top of it. We have the sub-brand part of our business is called Calling Out the Men. And I just wanted to put this slide up here because, as a male dominated sector, this stuff is really, really important. And Calling Out the Men is very much focused on providing emotional support for men in business. So the first bullet I talked there about holistic gender parity. I am hugely passionate about, equality, gender equality, but actually it's not really that equal right now. It is changing quite dramatically. I absolutely believe in equal pay, in equal opportunities, completely. But when you look at emotional support for men in the business world or in the workplace, there isn't anything. And it has actually improved in the last 2 years. But 2 years ago, when we launched this part of the business, if you Google support for men in business, what you would get as the top 4 or 5 kind of entries on Google were all about how men need to support women in business. There was nothing about supporting men emotionally in the business world, in the workplace. We've all seen the mental health statistics around men, suicide, alcohol dependence, missing persons, prison population, rough sleeping. The percentage is vastly men. Also, when you look at data from schools and children being expelled from school, boys. So we all know this. And if you look at it, the research is everywhere. The male mental health stuff is huge. But when you then look at it in the workplace, we're talking about it a lot more. But actually, there's nothing really there just for the men to support them. So this is what Calling Out the Men is all about. And male emotional and psychological stress does not fit with conventional diagnosis. And I think this is really important. So there's a lot of talk. It has got a bit better, I think. We've certainly challenged it, the toxic masculinity frame. So behavior that is demonstrated, such as anger, aggression, dominance, egotistical, all of that kind of stuff is framed as toxic masculine behavior. Now, I'm not a man, and I can absolutely demonstrate some of that behavior. So the fact it's called toxic masculinity is not helpful or particularly fair, but that kind of behavior is often what shows up when a man is not feeling good. So the conventional diagnosis might be, you know, someone who is struggling to sleep, losing confidence, and it is very obvious to see that, for example. But for a lot of men, it doesn't manifest in that way. It manifests in anger. The anxiety shows up as anger. The forceful behavior might become more forceful and dominant. So it's really important that that kind of behavior, we absolutely need to challenge it. We shouldn't tolerate it, but we need to support and challenge with empathy, because someone who is showing up in that way is not feeling good. If someone burst into tears, we would probably be more able to, depending how comfortable we are with emotion, be more able to ask that person what's going on. Do they need any support? If someone is behaving in a way that is, you know, fueled with anger, we're not likely to engage with them in that same way. Yet someone who is angry is not feeling good, and chances are they're feeling vulnerable, but the way they demonstrate that is through anger rather than bursting into tears. So this is really important just to know. The male brain is also wired differently. So as an example, the verbal centers and the emotional centers in the brain don't connect in the same way as they do in women. So women, generally speaking, will find it easier to articulate how they're feeling because the language around emotion will come to them with more ease, because our verbal and emotional centers are more connected than it would for men. So men struggle more with that generally. There's much more shame and fear around articulating that a man isn't feeling great. So put those two together, already a huge disadvantage. So the other piece that's really important is that the male brain is much more about processing action, taking action. It's much more physically impulsive, needs to move, and is much more about problem solving. So that is why, and again, I'm generalizing, by the way, so I know this is not true for every man, and a lot of women will show up like this, but generally speaking, you know, men want to fix stuff. Men want to solve the problem. And, you know, I have male friends, my husband, my son, who's 21. I might just want to share something and they want to jump in and tell me how I should solve it or how I could solve it or give me advice with absolute positive intent. But sometimes I just want to be heard. I don't want to be fixed, which is why that it's okay to talk and it's good to talk, which I completely connect to, doesn't always work for men. Because if there's nothing to do in terms of taking action, or there's no obvious way for them to fix the problem they're experiencing, just talking about it can keep them stuck. So I just wanted to share the calling out the men stuff, because for very male dominated industries, it's really important to have this as a backdrop. Keith, just shout if there are any questions or anything.
Yeah, interrupt when you finish that slide. There's two questions. One question is, what question do you need to ask when your job may be affecting your overall well-being? And the second question is, what does good mental health mean?
Okay.
So maybe something you come up with later in the conversation.
Yes. So if we can, I think I'm going to cover those two off. If I don't, then we can come back to them. But I think what I'm going to talk about will cover those off.
Okay.
But we can check in with the individuals in chat to make sure that it's covered.
Okay.
The healthy mental health, I'll talk to you about when I show you the scale. And what questions should you be asking, or how should you be articulating that? For me, that is all about psychological safety. And it is about having regular conversations, not just about what you need to do in your role, in your job, the task, the deliverables, the KPIs. It's also about checking in, how you're doing, how you're feeling, how you're managing. If those two conversations don't happen, organizational goals and human needs, that's when those kind of conversations around actually my role, the workload, whatever it might be, having to work away from home, is hugely impacting on my mental health. We have to provide the opportunity for people to have those conversations, because I have not met many people who would be super comfortable just going into that without any support or any kind of framework. So the scale is one way of doing that. And we've got other tools as well. So which I'm happy to share afterwards if people drop me an email. So one of our strap lines is feel better, do better. So I am hugely supportive of being positive and being happy when it's real, but there's a lot of pressure on that. And I love, this is one of my favorite quotes. Never in the history of calming down has anyone calmed down being told to calm down. The same thing is true for positivity. Pressure to be positive is unhelpful and can make things feel worse. We feel what we feel. There is no right or wrong, good, bad, negative or positive when it comes to emotion. Whether or not that emotion is serving us well is a question to ask ourselves. And what could we do? What might we be able to do? What support might we need to help ourselves feel better is a great question, are great questions. But to say to someone who's not feeling good, you know, chin up, you know, appreciate what you've got, look on the bright side is really unhelpful. Hearing how someone is feeling without putting pressure on them to be positive is the most powerful thing all of us can do. Yet most of us who are decent human beings don't like to see other people in pain. It triggers us. We feel uncomfortable with it. So we want them to feel better. We can't make anyone feel anything. So the positivity police, you've got to appreciate what you've got. You've got to be grateful. Actually, sometimes when you feel wretched, you can't be grateful. And I work with a lot of people, especially men, who have on the outside got it all. You know, great job, had a great career, great salary, family, great holidays, lovely car, great house, and they feel crap. And they feel a lot of shame around the fact they feel awful because they haven't got an excuse. You don't need an excuse. If you don't feel great, you don't feel great. And that is one of the reasons why a lot of people, especially men, struggle to talk about how they're feeling, because there's nothing serious enough in their opinion that would warrant them feeling that way. So being anti-positive is one of my favorite things. If you're feeling it, great. If you're not, that's fine too. We're hardwired to scan for threat. So we are looking for problems and threat and danger all the time. It's our default. The reptilian brain is always looking for danger because it keeps us safe on a ratio of 5 to 1. So that means we need 5 helpful experiences of something to override 1 that's not so helpful. So we will unconsciously delete any positive helpful experiences in a particular context if we have 1 that's not. We have something in the brain called negativity bias, which means we remember the bad stuff. You know, most of us will be able to recall the time we were insulted or hurt. We have to dig a bit deeper sometimes to remember the praise and compliments. And most of us struggle to receive them as well. So we're not wired to be positive. We also see change as a threat, not a reward. The brain is saying, hang on a minute, change. Oh, no, that's not safe. Avoid it, avoid it, avoid it. So thinking about COVID, well, we've had change forced upon us. That's been painful for so many people. It's normal. It's okay to feel that way. It's completely normal and human. So we're hardwired to avoid change. We are hardwired to avoid it. The more change we experience in our lives, the more comfortable we will become with that discomfort. But we are not set up to change. We are set up to stay the same, to keep familiar, to keep safe. Unrealistic optimism can be as detrimental as intense pessimism. I'm sure all of you have experienced at some point in your lives, not maybe in the workplace, the person who's always looking on the bright side, who always is, you know, looking for the positives. They might naturally be that, have trained themselves to be that way because they're not naturally going to be that way. But if you're not feeling great and someone is not hearing that, and they're being very, very optimistic about something that actually you just want to have a very realistic conversation about, it can feel really tough and actually can make us feel worse. So we talk about finding relief and feeling better. How could you find relief from how you're feeling right now? How might you feel better about that, this, whatever it is you're talking about? The first 2 bullets are really important when it comes to mental health, emotional well-being. We cannot control what's going on outside of us. So our outer world, you know, anything outside of us, we cannot control it. We might be able to influence it, but we absolutely cannot control it. And many of us spend most of our time focused on the stuff we cannot control, which is tormenting, it's exhausting, and it doesn't help us. Our inner world, what we talk about, the inner world, are our thoughts and our feelings. Our thoughts and our feelings are the only things we can control. And what we are thinking about will impact how we're feeling, which I'm going to talk to you about in a bit more detail. So if we're able to manage our thoughts and feelings, so manage where we're focusing our attention, noticing what we're telling ourselves about situations, then the outer world will impact us much less. Can't control it. All we can do is control how we think about it, and therefore how we feel about it. And I'll talk to you about how we can access some of that using the scale. So social pain, one of my favorite subjects. So social pain is when we experience any form of disconnection from another person or group of people. The really powerful thing about social pain that has helped us in the work that we do with those people who will say, you know, you just need to get over it. You paid a lot of money. You're a manager. Just get on with the job. Man up, chin up, that kind of stuff. Look on the bright side. When we are not connecting enough to another person or group of people, we experience social pain in the brain in the exact same way we experience physical pain. So the anterior cingulate cortex is activated when we experience any of this stuff that's on this slide. Loss, when we feel rejected, when we feel excluded, when we feel isolated, when we feel any form of interpersonal conflict with another person, when we feel misunderstood, when we feel undervalued, when we feel judged, when we lack influence, when we don't feel heard. When we experience any of those, the part of the brain will light up. The more significant the person, the more the pain. So the light will light up for longer and brighter. And when I say significant, that doesn't mean this has to be someone that you love, a family member, or of course, the ultimate loss is losing someone we love. But actually, there can be someone that you work with, you don't even like them, but they are hugely significant in your role. It's part of your project, on site, might be your boss, can impact your career. If we're not connected to them, then we will experience social pain more significantly than we might with someone who maybe we've just met that day on the train or the bus or walking our dog. The important thing to know is, though, we experience social pain even when we don't really know someone else. So one of the experiments they did for around social pain was to play a game of cyberball. So they took a group of people and they measured the brain activity and they linked people up remotely. They'd never seen each other, never spoken, but they knew they were in a game of cyberball with other people. And all that happened was the ball was being thrown, from person to person. One at a time, individuals would be disconnected from the game. They didn't know they'd been disconnected. All they noticed was the ball was no longer coming to them. The anterior cingulate cortex lit up. So even when we don't know someone, we've never seen them, being disconnected from a tribe puts us into pain. So this is huge. This is absolutely huge. And the other piece to add is we're constantly evaluating social threat. So that means we will experience social pain in the brain, even when it is not reality. So fear of judgment is huge. I do a lot of this stuff. So I no longer fear judgment. That's only because of the work that I do. My view is I'll do the best I can do. I know my subject. I hope people learn something. If they don't, and I've done the best I can, there's nothing I can do about that. That's helped me overcome my fear of judgment, by the way, in this arena. I have a fear of judgment in many other parts of my life, for sure I do. But a lot of people will avoid public speaking or doing anything like this because they're already fearing the judgment even before they've pressed, go on Teams or stood up at a conference or presented in a meeting. They're experiencing social pain. The anterior cingulate cortex is lighting up even before they've stood up and been judged. So we cannot avoid this stuff. We experience social pain, even if it's not real. And anyone who's experienced any chronic physical pain, even if it's a headache, I had my second jab a couple of weeks ago and I had a headache for a day. It wasn't a terrible headache, but it was constantly there. I felt knackered at the end of the day. So that is a mild form of chronic pain, physical pain. There are people in the world who are experiencing chronic social pain, going into the workplace and not connecting with and not feeling heard, not feeling influential, etc., etc. And for men, the workplace, work is the second biggest trigger for depression in men, second to relationship breakdown. So if there are men out there who are struggling in the workplace, even pre-COVID, but on the back of COVID, and maybe stuff isn't great at home and they're not talking about it, destructive. As we know, the statistics show us that. When we experience social pain, cortisol is released in exactly the same way that physical pain releases cortisol, the stress hormone. And when you have ongoing release of cortisol, anxiety will increase, and people who have never experienced anxiety before can get it. It can trigger depression. It's exhausting, saps our energy, and it actually can impact our ability to heal. So if we're unwell physically, social pain, especially ongoing because of the cortisol release, will impact our ability to get better. Also, if you have more of an aggressive tendency when feeling vulnerable, so fight, flight, freeze, I'm definitely a fighter. So if I feel vulnerable, my default knee-jerk reaction is to defend, attack. I'm more likely to get angry than cry. So if you've got more of that tendency, you're going to feel social pain more. If you suffer with anxiety, you're going to feel social pain more. If you're more introverted, you're going to experience pain, social pain more. And if you have what we call high emotionality, which is feeling tension and apprehension quite intensely, you're going to feel social pain more intensely. So social pain does not feel good, and it isn't good for us. And all of us will be experiencing this on a spectrum every day at some point. Someone doesn't reply to your WhatsApp message quickly enough. Someone doesn't invite you to a meeting you think you should be invited to. You are not included on an email to something. You're not on the project team and actually think you've got the expertise to be on that project team. Social pain. And just a few stats around the impact in the workplace. So these are pre-COVID stats. So these have gone through the roof. Absenteeism, 17.5 million days of absenteeism were attributed to mental health issues. And if you look at most of the data, it will be all around the social pain stuff about disconnection, not feeling heard, not feeling valued, all that kind of stuff. Presenteeism, which is I'm at my desk, I'm in the office, I'm on site, I'm online, on a Teams call, a Zoom call, but I'm not present. I'm here in body, but not in mind. Either because I'm not feeling good, but I feel unable to tell you the truth, or actually I'm just disengaged and not enjoying myself. I hate my job now, but I feel like I've got to go through the motions. 1 in 4 saw an increase. So if I don't feel able to talk to you about the fact, to the earlier point that someone put in chat about my job role is impacting my mental health, chances are someone in that place is going to be, presenteeism magnified. I'm here, but I'm not in it. Leaveism, which is taking time off of work or working at the weekends or in the evenings or on holiday to catch up, to keep in touch because we're afraid, uncomfortable of being disconnected in case we miss something. 73% was observed over the past 12 months. That was 2019 into 2020. 73% of those surveyed observed it. I mean, that is going to have gone through the roof now. People are online all the time, lack of boundary, people working at their kitchen table. I know some people are going back into the office, but it's not really full time. So not getting off of the laptop is really common now. So I'm cooking in the kitchen, I'm on my laptop in the kitchen, I'm always checking emails, not healthy. When you look at any work-related stress data or exit interview data, when people tend to say what they really mean, then social pain is cited throughout work-related stress data and exit interview data. And things like lack of role clarity comes up a lot with exit interview data and work-related stress. I don't know what's expected of me. I don't know how I'm doing. I don't know if I'm doing okay. I don't know if I'm delivering. No one tells me. That doesn't necessarily sound like a social pain thing, lack of role clarity. But actually, if I don't feel able to say, I just need some clarity around what you expect of me right now, that means I don't feel safe, which is indicative of social pain. So I just thought I'd show you this. Oh, yes.
Can I just interrupt? We've got 3 questions. Yep. One question I can't see fully. So I said, can we leave it at the end and we'll turn the mic on and you can ask it individually? Yeah. There's another question based on ISO 45003 as a global standard for practical guidance and managing psychological health. And what are your thoughts on that standard? A third question is, how do you communicate with a person who's naturally quiet and reserved, and how do you read their feelings? And the fourth question is, without any training in counselling or psychotherapy, how can you help support someone in the workplace? Shall I read them out individually?
So the ISO one, then if there's any way of getting it up and then just and short tracking it for me so I can have it here in the moment, I can tell you my view on that. The one about how do you help people with their feelings, I'm going to talk to you about that with the scale in a moment as an example. And let me be really clear now, psychotherapy, counselling, you know, I'm a coach and I do therapeutic techniques as well. I'm not a psychotherapist, I'm not a counsellor. This stuff I'm giving you in terms of backdrop is to give you some insight and understanding into, I guess, for two parts of this. Number one, to know that not feeling great is normal. It's actually a common human state. Not feeling good is a common human state. Mental health issues come when we are not feeling good for a significantly sustained period of time. So this is to give us some data and insight into it's okay to not be okay. And also anyone here working with people, leading people, just to give you the same kind of insight that you might have someone in your team or in your family who isn't feeling great, and just to know it's normal. And that doesn't, I'm not simplifying it and dismissing it. It's nothing to be afraid of. It is nothing to be afraid of. And you don't have to be a counsellor or a psychotherapist, even a coach who is, you know, teaching therapeutic techniques to be able to have these conversations. We are all capable of doing it. We just are often afraid of getting it wrong, which is so common. I don't want to make it worse. Hearing somebody, being there and asking someone how they're doing and giving them the opportunity to share how they're feeling, you can't get that wrong. If they are sharing with you that they are feeling really wretched, very low, suicidal, it's absolutely about having some details where you can help them go and make that contact. That is not your job. It's not my job. You know, I've worked with people who have told me they are feeling like they want to end their lives. We have links, contacts, you need to go and make some contact there. I am not qualified for that. So this is about allowing people the opportunity to share. And by the way, if they choose not to get the help, there is nothing you can do about it. And this is a real conflict for so many people. We can only help people to help themselves. We can only help people to help themselves. But enabling an environment, especially in the workspace, especially in a male-dominated environment where people are able to start to have those conversations and being able to be signposted to go somewhere else to get expert help is all we can do. And that isn't happening enough in our experience. So the ISO one, if someone can get that and share it, then I'll be able to give you my view.
Lou, if you go into conversations and they'll be written, it's written up, or I could read it out to you. I don't know how to share it.
If I come back to that, because I don't want to click on that because I can't see the chat when I've got my slides. Let me come back to that at the end. Is that all right? Yeah,
we'll do that at the end. Thanks, Steve.
So this was just, we did some work with the Chartered Institute of Building beginning of this year. Well, we do stuff with them regularly. And this, I just thought this won't surprise anybody, I'm sure. But this was a survey that they did, Understanding Mental Health in the Built Environment. And this was pre-COVID. And this was key survey findings from over 2,000 CIOB members. So stress was the most common mental health issue. 97% saying they experienced stress over the course of the year. Pre-COVID, 96% fatigued, 95% poor concentration, 91% feeling overwhelmed. I mean, huge. And this was anonymous, by the way. A quarter of construction workers have considered taking their own lives. I mean, it's just terrifying as a stat. In 2018-19, 26% of respondents said they had suicidal thoughts. So going back to what I just said, if we can enable an environment where people can say that, feeling that way, and then being able to signpost them, that is much more powerful than not having the environment just to say it out loud for the first time. But we are not responsible for trying to fix somebody. We can help someone help themselves. People are terrified of that, totally understandably, by the way. But just knowing we're not here to fix someone else, just to help send them in the right direction if they choose to. That's all we can do. 87% experience anxiety, 70% experiencing depression. And interestingly, the smaller the business, the more likely a person will experience suicidal thoughts, which when we delved into that, it's that feeling more responsible, feeling more pressure, feeling more load. 2/3 of respondents said they had not received any mental health training or awareness over the past 3 years. And only 1/3 said their employer would treat a mental health issue very seriously. And I honestly think that is not because people don't care. I think it's because people are afraid, to the point I've just raised, actually. So what we tend to do as human beings is go, that's way too painful, way too scary. I'm just going to avoid it. I'm just going to avoid it. I'm going to deflect it. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to ask someone how they're doing, because what if they tell me they're not doing well? What do I do about it? You don't do anything apart from hear them, ask them what they might need to help them feel better. If it's very significant and they're feeling very, very low, as we just talked about, it's about having something ready to give them where they can go and get help with experts. So this was this, I kind of guess the findings, we've just summarized it. We must ensure that the levels of investment and attention to mental health are the same as those given to, health and safety, because it's not that way at the moment. But of course it isn't. Health and safety, transactional. Very bloody important, by the way, but transactional. Easy to go around a site and look at what's right and what's not. To go and speak to someone about how they're feeling, much more scary and very alien for a lot of people. A lot of us haven't been nurtured in that way. A lot of us were brought up with caregivers who didn't do that either. So, why would we know how to do it? So social support is the antidote. So this builds on what I've just said. It is absolutely okay not to have answers, to not know, to be worried or feel fearful. And these 3 quotes were quotes that 3 of senior leaders that I've worked with for a long time, who during COVID actually were struggling hugely. Now, how do I reassure everyone that everything will be okay? I said, well, you can't, because it's not going to be. The level of responsibility a lot of leaders felt to make their team feel better. We can't make anyone feel anything. How do I turn this into a positive? Sometimes something isn't a positive. I absolutely believe we can learn from anything. I believe we can always learn from a situation, but sometimes you can't turn it into a positive. But there was pressure, as I talked about right at the beginning, the positivity stuff. We've got to be positive, especially in the workplace. It's important that I don't show any weakness or fear. The shame associated with that. I'll look weak, I'll look incompetent. What will people think of me? In my experience, and I've got a lot of it, working in this area, what people think when you show weakness or fear is that you're human. Because we all experience it. Vulnerability is the one thing that unites all of us. All of us have felt afraid at some point. We might not have felt afraid recently, but we certainly felt afraid when we were younger. We can all, small children, young children, teenagers. It's a long time ago for me, but I can still remember feeling fear then. I felt fear since, I felt fear recently. I'm going through a divorce. I feel very worried and fearful. All I've ever had when I've expressed my fear is support. And unless we are able to express it, we can't get the support. So there's more power in empathy than ever before. We can't make anyone feel better, but what we can do is hear them and allow them the space and the opportunity to share how they're feeling and ask them what support they might need. Not what can I do to make it better? What support might you need is really important. So this is our philosophy, high level. So we're only responsible for ourselves. And some of us, when we feel very low, and we felt low for a long time, really struggle to take any responsibility because we feel so low. So we can support people in that place, absolutely. But ultimately, what we have to do is help that person feel better so that they can take responsibility. Unless someone is a truly vulnerable individual, and what I mean by that is in breakdown, really not able to function cognitively, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. We can absolutely ask for support, someone to hold our hand, but not to carry us. We can only help others help themselves. Our focus of attention is powerful and drives our thinking. So really simple example, let's go right back to when COVID was kicking off and the Nightingale Hospital was being built when they were turning it into the hospital. And I remember watching the TV with my daughter who's 13 and I saw all the ventilators, and all the beds. And I said, wow, look what they've done to that place, Martha. And she said, oh my God, Mum, look at all the people that are going to die. And I said, wow, it's really interesting because I'm looking at that and thinking, look at all the people they can potentially going to save. So my focus of attention was what might go right. Martha's focus of attention was on what will go wrong. Now, we'll all grow up with thought patterns. Some of us might have, I can't do it, it's going to go wrong, as a very ingrained thought pattern. We can change it, but it takes a lot of focus and effort to do it. It's not going to change overnight. I have learned how to manage my anxiety by doing that. I was someone who suffered with severe anxiety for years. Nobody had a clue for a while, for quite a long time, actually. And I was afraid that people would think I was weak and incompetent and a bit pathetic. So I kept it to myself. I established a bit of a reputation of someone who had it all together. You know, she's running a business, she's got children. Wow, how's she doing it all? I wasn't doing it all, but I looked like I was. And then I was having really severe nighttime panic attacks. And my focus of attention around that was, people will think I'm weak and incompetent. People will not respect me. My focus of attention was, people will not respect me if I can't cope. So of course, my thoughts all spiraled out of that, which meant I didn't feel good. What we're thinking about impacts how we feel. So really understanding what our focus of attention is really powerful. What I learnt, and it didn't happen overnight, what I learned to do was be open, be honest. I've only had support when I did that. I still suffer with anxiety, nowhere near like I used to. What I've also learned is, when something goes wrong or when I'm worried about something, I'll say to myself, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from what's happened and not gone well? What can I learn about how I'm feeling right now? What can I learn about myself? That has absolutely changed my life, because I no longer have panic attacks. I no longer get into a very deep spiral of despair. I still get anxious, but I don't go into that place anymore, because I've learned to notice where I'm focusing my attention, and therefore what I'm thinking about. And how we think impacts our feelings, and how we feel impacts our behavior, and how we perform, and our relationships, which I've already talked about. And it's really important to remember that all our emotions are valid, which I'm going to talk to you about in a bit more detail. They're not right, they're not wrong, they're not good, they're not bad, they're not positive, they're not negative, they are what they are. And using that kind of binary language drives loads of judgment and stops people telling you how they feel. It stops people telling you how they feel. You feel what you feel, it's completely valid. If it's not serving you well, if it's not helping you, then some support and challenge around what might help you feel better is important. But to label emotions in a binary way is really not helpful. So how we feel, our emotions will limit or enable us. So my emotions, you know, my anxiety limited me for a long time. I was still functioning, but I was a functioning fakeaholic. That's what I call it, a functioning fakeaholic. It was limiting me. I denied mine for long term, and that limited me completely because I was really suffering with nighttime panic attacks. So saying it out loud, owning it, being honest about it is terrifying for most people, but that's when you can start to make a change. Unless we're honest about where we really are, we can't move forward from it. So what we do at Rising Vibe, we access what we're thinking via emotion. Because if I asked all of you now to put in chat, what are you thinking right now? What are your thoughts in this moment? Some of you might be able to, you know, get into your head and go, what am I thinking about? But actually, it's quite a clunky process. So what we do is we ask people how they're feeling first, and then ask them to tell us what their thoughts are afterwards that are driving those feelings. I'm going to show you the scale after this slide. So how can we challenge and change our thoughts to feel better? Not to feel positive, but to feel better. So remember, we can't change what's happening, but we can change the way we feel about it. A 1% improvement in how we feel is good enough to start momentum. So many people put pressure on themselves to jump into positivity, to make this big quantum leap from feeling crap to feeling great. It is impossible to do that. It's impossible to quantum leap. So we talk about baby steps all the time. A baby step shift in our thinking, going from, as an example, I can't do it, to I can't do it yet, is really powerful. Can hugely change the way we feel. So going from I can't do it to, of course I can do it, way too much of a jump for most people. So I can't do it right now, I can't do it yet. Slight shift, improvement, and then you can start to build momentum from that. With consistent, regular and intense focus, we can enable more choice of our thoughts. but it has to be consistent, regular and intense. We have to focus regularly. So my shift from focus of attention on stuff that was going to go wrong, catastrophizing, worrying things were going to end in disaster all the time, that was my focus of attention. It was not a quick fix to shift to, hang on a minute, I'm focusing on something, I'm worrying about something, what can I learn from that? That didn't happen overnight. I had to keep doing that, practice it, write it down, ask people to challenge me. I had to be honest that I was doing it, say it out loud so someone could challenge me, write it down. My neural pathways changed. All of our thought patterns, and we have between 50 and 70,000 thoughts a day, 95% are repeated, which is why we think we've got fixed mindset. There's no such thing as a fixed mindset. We have patterns, very strong patterns, but we can change them if we want. If we focus in a different way, we can change the neural pathways, but it doesn't happen overnight. And the older we are, the longer we've been running those patterns, the more focus we need. It's not a quick fix. We've got to keep practicing. We use the attention density theory at Rising Vibe, which is a neuroscientific approach which changes neural pathways. So we need to be exposed to new ways, new thinking, new data, new information, and then we've got to repeat and apply it. We've probably all heard of the use it or lose it thing. This is what this is. If we don't repeat and apply the new way, nothing will change. Nothing will change unless we repeat and apply the new way. So you could attend this, listen to this, think it's quite interesting. Maybe you don't. Go, yeah, that was interesting. But if you don't do something different on the back of it, nothing will change. Where we put attention creates connections in the brain, which drives the neural pathways to be, embedded or to change them. Attention holds in place brain circuits associated with what is being focused on. And eventually this will become part of the brain's hardwiring. So how do we do this? How do we start to change our thinking? Well, the rising vibrational scale is what we use. And for some people, they read this, they read the words, they go, no thanks, no interest in that. It's too heavy. I don't want to talk about emotion. If you feel that, or you're with someone who feels that, you're exactly the person who needs to get amongst it, to step into that place of discomfort and really to start to connect to how you're really feeling about something. What we know to be true, and I've talked about this already, men struggle more than women with emotional literacy. All the men that we've worked with, every single one, eventually, not necessarily to begin with, have talked about how using this on a regular basis has helped them to access and connect more to themselves. The basic way to use this scale is to, as part of an interaction, as part of one-to-ones, a lot of our clients use this in their one-to-ones now as part of every one-to-one supervision conversation. And just to say, so where are you on the scale today? Very, very high level, or in context of this project, in context of the piece of work we just lost, in context of the meeting you're just about to have, in context of the new team member, in context of your new line manager, in context of being put at risk, whatever it might be, macro, micro, where are you on the scale? And what is really powerful for a lot of people is you don't have to associate with the word. So you can say, I'm around a number 12. You don't have to say, I am worried. You can talk about how you're feeling in a disassociated way, which is a very powerful way for people to start having conversations about how they're feeling. There are 22 levels, as you can see. The handout itself is portrait, but we do it landscape just so we can get it all on one slide. There are 7 what we call high vibe emotions. They're not good, they're not right, they're not positive. They're high vibe. And there are 3 words on each level. You don't have to connect to every single one of the words. You only have to connect to one of them. The reason there are 3 is to give more choice. It's an intuitive tool. It's not a scientific tool. And what we discovered through some research, when we pulled this together in 2017, was each of the 3 words for us in the team and our clients at the time represented the same kind of level of intensity of feeling. That's why those 3 words are together. But you don't have to connect to all 3. There are 15 low vibe emotions. And low vibe emotions, there are more of those because we're hardwired to scan for danger. So we're more likely to have unhelpful thoughts, which drive low vibe emotions. So I'm just hitting myself and knocking my glasses off there. So that's why they're more low vibe emotions than high vibe emotions, because we're more likely to have unhelpful thoughts. So the question earlier about what is, what does healthy mental health look like? It looks like what we call duality. So duality is being in a high and low vibe state in any given context. To be just high vibe for any sustained period of time is pretty much impossible. 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day. Imagine how many thoughts that are. The thoughts drive how we feel. The thoughts drive how we feel. We're hardwired to scan for danger. We're hardwired to look for threat. Ratio 5:1, override any positive experiences. Negativity bias, look for problems. We are very, very unlikely to be in a state of high vibe sustained even throughout a day. Even throughout a day. Maybe, you're going on holiday, you're excited, maybe. You're getting married at your wedding, maybe. But often we'll dip into a little bit of low vibe at the same time. That is a healthy human state. That is what we would call mental health, that you are high and low vibe in any given context. So a very simple example of that is when Rising Vibe got hit by COVID on March the 13th, 2020, as so many people did. We lost our pipeline. All of the business came out of our pipeline in a 90-minute period. And I was in despair, but I was also in focus. And the thoughts I was having that were driving despair were, the business is over. The business is going to collapse. We have no business. My clients are having to cancel everything. The economy is going to be screwed. I'm not even going to be able to get another job if my business collapses. I'm not going to be able to pay the mortgage. I'm not going to be able to support my family. You get the picture. Spiral. But at the same time, I was also in number 4, focused, bouncing between the two and saying, so what can we do about this? What action can we take? What's an immediate first step? Who do I need to speak to straight away? What do I need to do first? So I was bouncing between the two. So even though I did feel pretty rubbish, I was in a healthy human state because I was bouncing between the two. The watch out is when you are low vibe only. Low vibe only, especially for a sustained period of time, is what we would call poor mental health. This is when mental illness will arise, when we are not feeling good for a sustained period of time. Using the scale to check in is a really proactive way of helping people be open with you about how they're feeling if you do it regularly. So rather than trying to spot the signs, mental health first aid, brilliant initiative. But mental health first aid is much more about spotting the signs when it's got bad. What this is about is enabling conversations proactively, regularly, before you have to start spotting the symptoms, because people feel therefore more able to talk about how they're feeling and get some help early before it gets too bad. So the questions at the top, 4 really powerful, simple coaching questions. So you're checking on the scale. Lou, where are you on the scale today? Where are you on the scale today? Well, I'm a bit of focused. I've got a little bit of overwhelm going on because I've got a lot on at the minute. I've just come back for some time off. I'm going through a divorce. So I've got a lot of focus going on. I feel confident. I've got hope, but I'm also overwhelmed. I've also got a little bit of blame going on. I've got some fear going on. So we won't just be in one place. We will be all over the place because our thoughts will be driving different emotions. When you get to the low vibe emotions, the questions here, so what might help you feel better? So if I think about my overwhelm, what might help me feel better? Tomorrow, coming into the office just a little bit earlier and just capturing what I've got on next week just to get ahead of the game a little bit, because I'm just back from holiday and I am in overwhelm. Can I control or influence that? Absolutely, I can control that. It's down to me. So what action do I need to take? I need to get out of bed earlier tomorrow, walk the dog earlier, and give myself an extra hour. Very obvious, but that's what I need to do. Do I need any support? Actually, I could ask my son. He's working from home at the minute on his placement. I could ask him to walk the dog for me. So that is a very transactional, simple example, by the way. There are much bigger issues out there for people, and they might not share them straight away. But those 4 questions around someone sharing low vibe with you, if you keep showing up and you keep asking them, will really help people start to feel more connected, have more psychological safety, start to build trust, and start to open up a little bit more. So if the answer to can you control or influence this is no, then the follow-up question is, okay, what else might help? What else might help? Until the response to can you control or influence that is yes. So I think I'm bang on an hour.